Hey everyone, it's James from Project Pass. Hope you all are doing well. And today we're going to do something a little different on the channel today. Something that I haven't done before. I've been throwing this idea around for the last few months, and I finally decided to take the plunge. But I am not doing this alone. I am doing this with a co-host, my good friend Andrew Boer. And we're going to do a virtual battlefield walk. And it's essentially kind of like a hybrid between a podcast that offers some visuals. At least that's how it shapes up in my mind. But yeah, so the goal of my channel has always been to bring these battlefields to your living room or your palm of your hand if you're watching this on your phone. And I feel like this is another good way to be able to do that and share these stories. So I'm teaming up with Andrew here on these virtual battlefield walks as we take you through various battlefields. But Andrew and I are also working on another project together. We are co-hosting a podcast called the Distant Drums Podcast, History You Can March To. And we've already recorded a handful of episodes. We've talked to some fantastic guests already, and we're really excited to share these stories. We're thinking about releasing it sometime between mid-September and early October. We haven't really decided yet, but we're really excited to share this with you. So keep an eye out for the Distant Drums Podcast. And Andrew, since the audience is going to be seeing a little bit more of you through this series, go ahead and share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, first off, James, it's an honor to be on your channel for this battle walk that we're about to do. I've been a fan of your channel since I discovered it years ago, so super excited to get to know you more and share our passion of Civil War history with you. But to kind of tell about me a little bit, so I grew up in the Lower Peninsula of Michigan, right in the center of the state on a 7-generation family farm where I raised registered Hereford cattle. So that's my passion. I went to Michigan State University, got a degree in agriculture there. But my passion growing up and to this day has been American military history, ranging from the American Revolution to, current wars and whatnot. But I'm currently researching and writing a book on World War II, so it spans the realm of history here. But ever since I was a kid, you can consider it brainwashed, but my dad is a big genealogist, family history guy, and took me on numerous trips to Civil War battlefields. Practically lived at Gettysburg as a kid, much to the chagrin of my mother. But spent a lot of time there. And then when I was in a junior in high school, I started my own Civil War roundtable. And to this day, we still meet here and there. And that was 10 years ago. But just love that. And that same year, my dad and I, over spring break, while my friends were down in Florida at the beach, I was with my dad and youngest brother, and we went out east, what we called the Big Eastern Theater Civil War battlefield trip. And I kid you not, James, we visited 28 different battlefields of the Eastern Theater of the Civil War. And according to my dad's Fitbit, we walked about 55 miles total. So it was a crazy trip for us, and had a really good time there. But, to end my talk here, when I started getting into the Civil War, whether it was watching the Blue and the Gray miniseries, Ken Burns or TV series there, or Gettysburg, I was fascinated by guys like Lincoln and Stonewall Jackson, the key heads of the Civil War history. But now, as I've gotten back into it, I wanted to learn more about my family history, what my state did in the Civil War. Michigan was very involved in the Civil War. And according to my dad, we have upwards between 50 and 70 direct ancestors who fought in the Civil War. So very interested to, learn more. And I feel like, with our podcast and this channel, we'll be able to do that. So super excited to be a part of this with you, and glad to talk about a lesser known topic with you here for me, the 27th Connecticut.
Yeah. This is Andrew's holding it down in Michigan. I'm holding it down in Florida. So together, I feel like we're going to cover a broad range of topics here. But yeah, we're going to dive into the 27th Connecticut and their story at Gettysburg. I visited Gettysburg a few months back, and I learned about their story. I walked through the Wheatfield, which is where they were engaged, and it was a very powerful story, and it's one that I really look forward to sharing with you all. And like I said, me and Andrew are teaming up on this, and we're really excited. We got hopefully some good things coming down the line. We are using a new software, so every now and then you may see me throw up the wrong image, but just bear with us. This is going to be, I think, a really cool concept. So, with that being said, Andrew, 27th Connecticut, before Gettysburg, they were around a bit. Can you offer us a bit of regimental history and things that they experienced prior to the Battle of Gettysburg?
Absolutely. So the 27th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry is unique. And like I mentioned earlier, it's one of those units that I've kind of overlooked in my studying of Civil War history. But the 27th Connecticut regimental history was written right after the war by Winthrop D. Sheldon. And he was a lieutenant in Company H. And it's like I said, it's right after the war. So it was a very good resource to study as we prep for this. But the 27th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry was formed and mustered at Camp Terry in New Haven, Connecticut in late summer 1862. And what's so unique about that is after the Peninsula Campaign, where General George B. McClellan failed to take Richmond, President Abraham Lincoln called twice for 300,000 volunteers to serve in the Union Army. One was for a 3-year enlistment, and the other was for a 9-month enlistment. And the 27th Connecticut comes out of that 9-month enlistment. They were originally used as were thought of going in to be a militia unit to guard and defend Washington. But what's so unique about being in a militia unit first is that they were able to elect their officers. And so they elected Colonel Richard S. Bostwick. As a lieutenant colonel, they elected Henry C. Merwin. And Merwin we'll discuss in depth a little bit today. And then at major, they elected Theodore Bixby. And the men of the 27th Connecticut, from all resources that I've read, were kind of a mixture of occupations. They were farmers or mechanics, some were school teachers. So the whole broad spectrum of Connecticut was used in this unit. And they set out from New Haven with about 829 officers and men on October 22nd, 1862. And I want our listeners to remember that date as we go forward here. But they were assigned to Brigadier General Samuel Zook's 3rd Brigade of Hancock's 1st Division and Major General Darius Couch's 2nd Corps. And they arrived in camp at Falmouth, Virginia on December 9th, 1862. And the next few days, any Civil War buff knows what's about to happen. But they spent the next day or so prepping, getting ready. And on the next day, the 10th, which is my birthday, 250 men were detached for picket duty along the Rappahannock River. So as we dive into this a little bit, General Ambrose Burnside takes over for General McClellan after Antietam in September of 1862. So Burnside is moving to get Lee there in Virginia and try and take him there from the north. However, their goal of getting pontoon bridges and whatnot to cross the Rappahannock River does not arrive in time. So Burnside slows down, and on December 11th, men from my home state, the 7th Michigan, and some other units try crossing, and they make the first, we'll call it an amphibious or waterfront landing in American history, which will, end up taking place on the 11th under enemy fire. There's sharpshooters under General Barksdale located in the town of Fredericksburg. So on the 12th of December, the 27th Connecticut crosses the Rappahannock River and come into this melee of the town of Fredericksburg that's been looted since the occupation. So The 27th gets ready to go into action, and shortly after breakfast, according to Sheldon, they fall into line, and then they, at a double quick, go into battle, and they assault the stone wall just below Marie's Heights there, the infamous stone wall that we think of now when we study Fredericksburg. And they go in, bayonets fixed, and they get to within 100 yards of that stone wall, and unfortunately aren't able to breach it. And so as the battle waves and rages on, they are ordered to lie down and have to fight from the ground, and then aren't able to leave the field until dusk. And as we know, the Battle of Fredericksburg results in a Confederate victory, and the Union Army goes back across the Rappahannock River. But approximately 110 men from the 27th Connecticut were killed and or wounded that day. And so for the next few months, they are attached to picket duty again. And that 250 men that I mentioned before come back to the unit. And by the spring, they are still in Virginia and move their way to the United States Ford, where ultimately, end of April, early May, the Chancellorsville campaign begins. And so on May 2nd, after General Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson's flank attack, the Union Army moves back to what they call the Bushbeck Line. And the 27th Connecticut at this time is situated near the Chancellor House, where they formed breastworks. But as the battle moves towards them, moves east, the 27th Connecticut ultimately gets called into battle. And so what happens with that is they form a line, and they prep to replace pickets in a ravine near a small creek, according to Sheldon. And one thing to note is the 27th is not at full strength at that, because they are less the companies D and F of that unit. So two companies are not with them at this time. But on May the 3rd, when this all transpires, they come under heavy artillery fire, and the battle just rages towards them. And Sheldon talked about, we can hear the battle coming towards us, but it hasn't hit us yet. Artillery fragments are hitting us above in the tree line. And that is when a officer in the 10th Georgia, who we will be discussing later, comes out with a white flag and pretty much tells Colonel Bostwick that your unit is surrounded. You might as well surrender right now. And so Colonel Bostwick surrenders his men, and 8 of 10 companies are captured. The captured men go to Spotsylvania Courthouse, then to Richmond, and then are sent north to Annapolis, Maryland. And then ultimately most are paroled back. And in exchange, Colonel Bostwick returns to the unit, but soon falls ill and is replaced by Colonel Henry Merwin. And so by this time, the 27th had 160 men, totaling 3 companies, going into the Gettysburg campaign.
Gosh, I mean, so they enlisted as a 9-month regiment. Quick recap. Their first real combat was Fredericksburg against Marie's Heights.
Yep.
A couple months later, they find themselves at Chancellorsville. And then 8 of the 10 companies within the regiment are captured, with the exceptions of Company D and Company F, which is essentially going to be what makes up their force at Gettysburg. So, so they enlisted in October of 1862. They were a 9-month regiment. So that would put their enlistments up in July of 1863, if I'm mathing that correctly. So what happens in July of 1863? The Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So the remnants of the 27th Connecticut find themselves in Caldwell's division, and the Battle of Gettysburg is unfolding July 2nd of 1863. So we mentioned Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merwin was their commander. They're in Caldwell's division. And on July 2nd, around 4 p.m., General Longstreet would launch his attack. His goal was to roll up the Union line, their left flank, and roll up the line and essentially collapse the Union fishhook that we know so well today. Well, before he launched his attack, Union General Dan Sickles would move his Third Corps troops forward and nestle them along the Emmitsburg Road in places like the Peach Orchard, running down into the Wheatfield, into Devil's Den. These places will soon cement themselves forever in American military history. So, as Longstreet launches his attack, those forces are essentially drawn together, and things go from bad to worse for the Union in this now salient. So, we're going to pull up a map of the Wheatfield here. Now, the Wheatfield is chaotic. There's a lot of moving parts. So we're going to try and break it down the best we can. So initially, the earliest fighting in the Wheatfield, you had Anderson's Georgians advancing through the Rose Woods, and they would meet with elements of de Trobriand's brigade, specifically the 17th Maine, which was nestled along a stone wall right at the edge of the Wheatfield, a rather strong position, and they would hold off several Confederate attacks. And I believe the 11th Georgia in Anderson's brigade would suffer almost 50% casualties. So this is just a brutal fight from the get-go. And like we touched on, things were going from bad to worse for the Union forces in this salient, and they would need help. So the Wheatfield was essentially just pulling in units from all over the Union line. You had 5th Corps elements coming down, and now Caldwell's division, which was part of the Union 2nd Corps, was being called upon to reinforce this area. So elements of de Trobriand's brigade are being pushed back by Anderson's Georgians through the Rose Woods, and Caldwell's division is brought up. In Caldwell's division is Colonel John Brooks' brigade. Within Colonel John Brooks' brigade is the 27th Connecticut. At the time of this fight, they arrive in this area around 6 p.m. They have about 75 men in their regiment of the original nearly 900 that mustered in 9 months before. So a large bulk of them were captured at Chancellorsville, with the exceptions of Company D and F, which would leave them with about 75 men under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merwin. And, Caldwell's division is unique in itself. It was a very experienced division. These men saw horrific combat, and they were probably some of the hardest fighters in the Army of the Potomac at this time. And they had 4 brigades in their division, which was pretty unique to the Army of the Potomac at that time. I believe they were the only division to have 4 brigades. But with that being said, they were extremely undermanned because they have seen so much hard fighting. I believe Brooks' brigade only had a little bit over 800 men total out of the 4 or 5 regiments that were in the brigade. I believe it's 5 regiments. Kelly's Irish brigade was a mere fraction of itself a couple years earlier. I believe the 69th New York and the Irish Brigade had a similar number to the 27th Connecticut, maybe 70, 80 men at the most. So we're focusing on Caldwell's division, and they are entering the Wheatfield around 6 p.m., like we mentioned, and Colonel John Brooks' brigade would be held in reserve initially. He would send out Kelly's brigade, and then he would send out Zook's brigade, and they would kind of sweep towards what would be known as the Stony Hill. And then you had Edward Cross's brigade coming across the Wheatfield and engaging Anderson's Georgians. Well, Cross found himself in need of relief. So at around 6:30, Colonel John Brooks' brigade would be pushed into the Wheatfield, and they would relieve Cross's brigade. And like we touched on, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merwin was their commander. Just a little bit about him. He was born on September 17th of 1839 in Brookfield, Connecticut. He originally volunteered with the 2nd Connecticut, which was a 3-month regiment at the beginning of the war. And he would serve as a sergeant, and he saw his first combat at 1st Manassas. Interesting thing about Merwin, he was captured at Chancellorsville, and he was paroled and made his way back to the regiment in time to be at the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm not sure if you can call that lucky or not. He's lucky in the fact that he was able to get out pretty soon, but now he's in some of the bloodiest fighting in the Battle of Gettysburg. And what I'm going to do is, like we touched on, the Wheatfield is chaotic. There's a lot of moving parts. So for the sake of understanding a little easier and just to follow in the footsteps of the 27th Connecticut, I made a map showing Brooks' brigade. And you can kind of see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the stops we're going to make as the 27th makes their way across the Wheatfield. So, and again, these areas are approximate. I did the best I can to get as close as I could. But for the sake of the ease of understanding, I kind of took out a lot of the other moving parts. So we go from this to this in hopes of making it a little easier. Now, stop one, the Brooks Brigade is ordered forward, and their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merwin, would be killed in action shortly after advancing into the Wheatfield. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of these men. These men have already been through so much. There's 75 men left out of the nearly 900 left. And now they're advancing into the Wheatfield, and their commander, who made his way back from capture at Chancellorsville, is killed in action moments into this battle here. And stop one, there is a marker. This is the Wheatfield Road, and there is a marker to Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merwin in the approximate location in which he fell. Just one of those powerful markers that dot the battlefield. It's not to a unit or a brigade, it's to an individual. And to me, that speaks volumes of what these men thought of Lieutenant Colonel Merwin, that they went back to the battlefield after the battle and placed this monument just to him. So where you're seeing stop one, that is the approximate location where Merwin was killed and where his monument is. Now, once Merwin would go down, he would utter something along the lines of, "My poor regiment is suffering fearfully," or something along those lines. And then obviously he would perish from his wounds. And Major James Coburn would eventually take command, push the 27th Connecticut into the Wheatfield, and that is where we're going to see stop number two. So again, this is an approximate location. Where you're seeing the two is where the 27th Connecticut monument is, right in the middle of the Wheatfield. And this marks the approximate location where the 27th would advance along with the rest of Brooks' brigade, and they would find a little bit of high ground. And they would stop there for several minutes and begin engaging Anderson's Georgians that you see here at the far edge of the Wheatfield. That's where the 17th Maine was, along that stone wall. They eventually pushed back the Turbrand's men. They held off Cross's brigade, and now Brooks' brigade's coming in. Now the 27th is kind of on this high ground here, and they're exchanging volleys back and forth. But the 27th realized they weren't in the most tenable position. Here's another shot of the Wheatfield looking at Brooks' brigade. So Brooks' brigade would have been advancing in our general direction, and you can kind of see a little high ground in that area. I'm not sure if that's the exact spot where Brooks' brigade stopped and was exchanging fire, but to me that offers a pretty good visual of just the subtle undulations of the Wheatfield. So just to bring it back to stop number two, they would engage with Anderson's men. They realized that they were kind of exposed. Although you have some high ground, you're in the middle of a field with no cover, and there's Confederate forces on your flank and to your front. So they were suffering some casualties here, and they made a decision to push forward towards Anderson's Georgians. And now we're at stop number three, and they're about to push into the Rose Woods. And the reason why we're at stop number three is because Captain Jedediah Chapman would be killed in action on this spot. There's another marker honoring this man and his service and his sacrifice in that area. He was born November 21st of 1839 in New Haven County, Connecticut. He was the captain of Company H, which was captured at Chancellorsville, but for Captain Chapman here, he was sick. So while he was sick, he wasn't on the front line, so he evaded capture. He would nurse himself back to health, make it back to his regiment in time for the Battle of Gettysburg, and he would be killed leading a company of mixed members from whatever stragglers and people that were able to elude capture. He was essentially leading a mixed company, really squads, really, because there wasn't that many men. And he would be killed in action. And it kind of makes you think. You think of Chapman, and then you think of Merwin. These are two men who made their way back to their units in time for this battle. What if they showed up a day late? They would still be alive. And, maybe they muster out in a couple weeks. Maybe they re-enlist and they're killed at another battle. But the fact of the matter is both men made it back to their regiment, and both men were killed in the Wheatfield, advancing across this vortex of death. And again, I'll bring up stop three here. That's the approximate location where Captain Chapman would be killed leading a company of mixed men from various companies. and he has a marker there as well. So again, it goes to show you when these men come back to the battlefield and they honor their regiment, they place a marker. These men went back, not only placed one to their regiment, but placed two for these individuals here, and that to me that speaks volumes. Um, so the 27th would continue pushing into the Rose Woods. Now, the Rose Woods is very, oh, it's not tricky, but very deceiving. When you think of woods, you just think of, some trees and stuff. But me and my buddy walked through the Rose Woods several years ago in search of Captain Henry Fuller's monument, who was also in Brooks Brigade. He would be killed in action in the middle of the Rose Woods. He has a monument there that's seldom visited. I have a video if you wanted to see it. It's on the channel. But walking through the Rose Woods, we kind of tried to follow his path as best we could. We went in by the stone wall of the 17th Main, and it was very uneven. There was rocky in some places. There's a little creek that runs into the Rose Woods. There's some marshy, nasty, wet areas. A lot of subtle rises and dips. It's not very conducive to that standard linear warfare. So imagine, Anderson's Georgians coming through there. Their formations are being broken apart, and now Brooks Brigade's coming back through, pushing them out. And think about what's happening to their formations. It's not easy terrain. So they would continue pushing back Anderson's Georgians, and they would get to stop 4 here. Now 4 and 5 are looped together. Stop 4 is an advanced marker, essentially in the woods just before a rise. And that is marking the farthest advance of the 27th Connecticut, and I would assume the rest of Brooks Brigade. Stop 5 is the actual monument to the regiment along modern day Brook Avenue. And as you can see here, when they reach this portion of the battlefield here, a fresh Confederate brigade, more Georgians under the command of Paul Sims, would enter the field here. And the Brooks Brigade, again, it wasn't just the 27th like you're seeing on the map. I just took out the rest of the brigade so we could follow them a little easier. But you had Brooks Brigades essentially squaring off against Sims' fresh Georgia Brigade. And I read that this is a fight between 20 and 30 minutes, that these two sides were just duking it out at pretty close range here. And Brooks Brigade was essentially exposed. They advanced the farthest out of anyone in Caldwell's division. Remember, we had a couple brigades advance towards what would be known as Stony Hill. Cross's brigade needed to be relieved by Brooks Brigade. So Brooks Brigade pushed to where you're seeing here, and they were exposed now. And they would eventually have to pull back. One interesting thing about this fight is within Sem's brigade, you had the 10th and 51st Georgia, 2 regiments that were directly engaged with the 27th at Chancellorsville. And you touched on the 10th Georgia essentially demanded their surrender at Chancellorsville. And now these 2 regiments are squaring off against each other just, really weeks later. Now, did they know that they were squaring off against each other? I don't know. Probably not. Think about the chaos of battle. But did the 10th Georgia or the 27th Connecticut after the battle realize that they were squaring off against each other? Maybe, especially when you round up some prisoners and you learn their regiment. But I just thought that was just one of those interesting exchanges that, it seems like you always get a couple of those with every Civil War battle. 2 regiments squaring off multiple times throughout the war. And so essentially, Sem's brigade would begin pushing back Brooks Brigade, and you had Kershaw's brigade coming through and just pushing back all these Union troops back into the Wheatfield over the very ground that they just fought and bled over. And now it's the Confederates' turn, and they're pushing back the Union forces here. So you just have that ebb and flow that, just this Wheatfield just keeps drawing in these units, chewing them up, and essentially spinning them back out. And we touched on the 27th had about 75 men going into the battle. Their action at the Wheatfield, they would suffer 10 killed, 23 wounded, and 4 missing. So they would essentially suffer 50% casualties. And on July 3rd, come roll call, they would muster 37, 38 men, barely. And just a fraction of what enlisted several months prior. And following the Battle of Gettysburg, the 27th would muster out on July 23rd of 1863. So just mere weeks before mustering out, another 10 men would be killed, when their muster date is just in sight. It's just one of those unfortunate events. You had another 9-month regiment, the 151st Pennsylvania, get chewed up on day one. Again, they were mustering out weeks after Gettysburg, and half the regiment fell on McPherson's Ridge. But it's just one of those stories that isn't full of honor and glory, but it is filled with sacrifice, selflessness, and I thought their story needed to be shared.
Absolutely. And what's crazy about it, James, is I found a newspaper article from the Hartford Courant in Hartford, Connecticut, dated July 22nd, 1863, and the title is "The 27th Connecticut Regiment en route home." And just prefacing this here, the 27th Connecticut Regiment also arrived here this evening from Washington. They will leave for New Haven in the 6 o'clock train on Wednesday morning. Both regiments, meaning that and the 12th Rhode Island, as that's mentioned in the article as well, were 9 months men, the former having been in General Burnside's corps. So, I mean, like I mentioned in the beginning talk there, you think about it, and they were gone. They started not even a year before. I mean, their 9-month enlistment is over, but they see 3 of the most ferocious combat experiences that probably any unit could see in the war.
Yeah, back to back to back. I mean, and they were just a month late to Antietam. So imagine if they
Yeah.
mustered in, a month prior. Then you have a 16th Connecticut story where these men went into Antietam with little to no training. So yeah, just one of those regiments that just saw a lot in their brief 9 months. Just awful battles, and while you can say companies D and F had a little luck at Chancellorsville, that luck certainly ran out in the Wheatfield at Gettysburg. Just again, this one of these stories that once you go there and you're just learning about it, it's just you wonder how anyone survived. Just
Yeah.
a really rough portion of the fight at Gettysburg. Do you have anything else, Andrew? Any other nuggets or quotes or anything like that?
No, like I mentioned a few minutes ago here, like when you're studying these regiments, dive into these primary sources. The regiment, I know some regimental histories can kind of go here and there, but the 27th I really enjoyed. And newspapers.com, that looking up what regiments did is amazing. They had a lot of coverage there on their Fredericksburg action. So, no, a very unique regiment, sad story, but did their state well.
Yep. And then here's another source: Brigades at Gettysburg. Phenomenal resource. Anytime I'm doing a video or traveling to Gettysburg to make a video, this is usually my first choice for research and notes and firsthand accounts. I threw back up the map. Again, our goal is to bring this battlefield to your living room, palm of your hand, so you don't have to. Life is crazy. Sometimes we're not able to get out to these places, whether it's financial reasons, health reasons, or just, life is getting away from us. I have 20 videos I have to edit that I haven't gotten to because family comes first. That's what's important. But here is the stops. Again, so if you're in the Gettysburg area and you're seeing this, stop 1, Merwin's marker is right on the Wheatfield Road. Stop 2 is right smack dab in the middle of the Wheatfield. You have Winslow's Battery there. And then you can see the 27th monument. I believe it's the tallest one in the Wheatfield. And then again, right along the road, de Trobriand Road, you have the 17th Maine, a beautiful monument. And then you have the monument, or marker, I should say, to Captain Chapman. And then if you want to find marker 4, go to Brook Avenue here. There's parking right at number 5, Brook Avenue. You have Semmes's tablet. There's all these other markers and monuments to Brooks Brigade. Find the 27th Connecticut monument, and just to the right of it is a trail, maybe about 20 yards into the Rose Woods. It's decent grade. I'll throw up a picture here so you can see it. But that is the advanced position of the 27th Connecticut. And that's their farthest advance. And you can find that by going to stop number 5, which is their 2nd regimental marker. And then just follow a trail right behind the marker, about 20, 25 yards, and you'll see their advanced marker pretty much on a stone. So again, that's really their trek through the Wheatfield. Again, this is a new concept. We're trying it out, seeing if it's valuable. If there's a story you guys want covered, or a portion of the battlefield you like to see in this format, or if you didn't like it at all, let us know, because we're constantly trying to find new ways to get these stories to you, and remember these men and their sacrifice on both sides. So Andrew, if you don't have anything else, we'll wrap things up here. Again, keep an eye out for the Distant Drums podcast, History That You Can March To, coming out either mid-September or October. And I got a lot of guests interviewed. We got a lot more lined up, and we're really excited to share these stories with you. And like I always say, we're going to catch you on the next one.
Thank you so much, James, for having me. It was a great time.